Good afternoon, everybody. The fevers are on me now, the virus mad to ravage my last 50 T cells. It's hard to keep the memory at full dazzle with so much loss to mock it. Roger gone, Craig gone, Caesar gone, Stevie gone. And this feeling that I'm the last one left in a world where only the ghosts still laugh. But at least they're the ghosts of full-grown men, proof that all of us got that far, free of the traps and the lies. And from that moment on, the brink of summer's end, no one would ever tell me again that men like me couldn't love. From Borrowed Time, an AIDS memoir by Paul Monette, West Hollywood author whose book, Becoming a Man, won the National Book Award. He died of AIDS in 1995 at age 49.
I want to build an organization to save my life. If Wales, Snails, Chrysler, and Nixon can be saved, the lives of black men are priceless and must be saved. I don't want to wake up one day and read a report by the Heritage Foundation and find out that black people are extinct. From Essex Hemphill, editor of the Black Gay anthology, Brother to Brother, and a visiting scholar at the Getty Center. He died of AIDS in 1995 at age 38.
Go without hate, but not without rage. Heal the world. Paul Monette.
They don't know we are becoming powerful. Every time we kiss, we confirm the new world coming. Essex Hemphill.
Thank you, Gerald and Peter, for those beautiful, powerful words. Essex and Paul are also with us today in the magnificent quilt panels that you see behind this stage, two of which bear their names. And two of the quotes that you just heard are going to be permanently engraved on our AIDS monument. I'm Erwin Rappaport, Chair of the Board of Directors of the Foundation for the AIDS Monument. Thank you so much for being here today. Today we're commemorating the 40th anniversary of the Center for Disease Control's first report on June 5th, 1981, about a disease that would become known as AIDS. Today is also a monumental day for all of us here in West Hollywood and across Los Angeles, because today is the ceremonial groundbreaking for Story's The AIDS Monument. Many of you here today are our major donors who have contributed from $25,000 to $500,000, including our largest private donors, Cedars-Sinai, Visit West Hollywood, the Herb Ritz Foundation, Steve Tisch, and the Dwight Stewart Youth Fund, and our largest public donors, the City of West Hollywood, the State of California, and the County of Los Angeles. Also here today are many of our hardworking, hands-on board members, past and present, including founders Craig Doherty and Jason Kennedy, and former board chair Mark Lehman. It's because of all of you and the City of West Hollywood, including former Mayor and Council Member John Duran and current Council Member and former Mayor John D'Amico, that we were able to close our capital campaign for the building of the monument. And now we can continue to gather and tell stories and raise more money for what we're calling the digital monument, and more about that later. We love that we could all be together today in person to finally put shovels in the ground, not to bury our dead as we've done for 40 years, but so that out of this ground can grow a monument dedicated to love in all of its facets and brilliance. At the end of the day, And at the end of 4 decades, it's all about love. Our speakers today are embodiments of that love. The 40th anniversary of the CDC's report about AIDS is a milestone in an era defined by the loss of people we loved. Like a son, and like a mother and young sister. It's also an era defined by people who loved each other, themselves, and life itself so much that they struggled bravely to stay alive. Many did, but tragically many, 725,000 Americans did not survive. 40 years of love manifested by people and organizations caring for and ministering to people in need, and finding the cause of the horrible sickness and death, and medical treatments and drugs to prolong and save lives, and hopefully very soon a vaccine. 40 years of people protesting and advocating on behalf of people too weak in their bodies or too powerless in their society to help themselves. And 40 years of our public servants showing their love for their country, for their state, for their county, and their city, and the people they represent. It is my great pleasure to introduce my friend Lindsay Horvath, the mayor of the great city of West Hollywood, California, where Stories the AIDS Monument will stand in bronze and stone and light as a soaring testament to the love that survives.
Good afternoon, everyone. There are so many people here I would like to welcome by name, but instead I want to start by honoring a tradition that was started by my friend John D'Amico, who's here today. And I'd like to begin by asking us to speak aloud the names of people we'll never forget, maybe people we didn't even know personally, but those whose lives we lost to AIDS. I'm going to start by naming one of the founders of our city, Ron Stone. Thank you. It's been a while since we've been together in person, and it's nice to see the faces of so many beautiful people gathered here today. We've been through a dark and challenging time together this past year and change, and yet, in spite of what we face together as a community, today I have hope. 40 years ago, the first 5 cases of what we now know to be AIDS were first reported. These cases are often referenced in terms of the impact they had on gay men who heard the news. 5 young, white, previously healthy gay men inexplicably exhibited symptoms that indicated their immune systems were not working. While the report understandably did not reference the names of these 5 men, today I have hope that their names might have been spoken aloud today, and that their spirits are alive with us in this moment. The full story of HIV has emerged over the past 40 years, and our city remains unwavering in our commitment to bring an end to this disease. Since our incorporation in 1984, West Hollywood has been at the forefront of efforts to confront the HIV/AIDS epidemic. Our city responded with resources and creativity, with compassion and commitment, with hope and optimism. Today, we help to ensure that this pivotal time in the history of our community and our world will be remembered. Our city's leadership, past and present, has directed more than $100 million to fund HIV/AIDS direct services, education, housing, treatment, condoms, and public awareness events, including providing the land to help make this space take shape. We initiated the HIV Zero Strategic Plan, which expanded access to health care, reduced new HIV infections, reduced HIV-related disparities and health inequalities, and slowed the progress of the disease from HIV to AIDS. Now, researchers are on the cusp of presenting a cure for HIV, and West Hollywood will help to ensure that it is accessible to all, and that we may one day see a world without HIV/AIDS. West Hollywood recognizes the importance of sharing the stories of the time of AIDS, however long that lasts, and providing a space to mourn, grieve, and celebrate our loved ones who died. We also imagine and intend for this space to be a place of activism, community, and gathering, led by a grassroots effort which began with a few visionary people and expanded to bring broad community support. The journey to create this public space includes each of you, and I am happy to see all of the people here today who made it possible. West Hollywood recognizes your effort, which has been nothing short of miraculous. Today, we see that hard work and determination will manifest an actual place that belongs to everyone. I want to thank and acknowledge in a special way the City Council members who boldly voted to make this monument possible, initiated by Councilmember John D'Amico and former Councilmember John Duran, and unanimously supported by former Councilmember Jeffrey Prang, former Councilmember Abby Land, and former Councilmember John Heilman. I want to thank every member of the FAM board, your amazing staff and design team, and the donors who have generously invested in making this AIDS monument a reality. I also want to acknowledge my colleagues who continue our city's commitment to this monument, as well as to increased access to resources and healthcare, and to a future without HIV/AIDS. Mayor Pro Tem Lauren Meister, Councilmember Seppi Shine, and Councilmember John Erickson, along with our city staff, Paul Arvalo, Oscar Delgado, Steve Campbell, Helen Collins, Rick Abramson, David Juni, Derek Murray, and so many others who both shepherded along this project and served our community members living with HIV. We stand rooted in our partnership to break ground not only on this monument, but also on the future that is possible when we all remain committed to creating a world without HIV/AIDS. Today, as we did yesterday and we will tomorrow, I know that the spirit of the people with whom we shared community and built lives and found home will now help us break open this space to hold the memory of our past and the possibility of our future. This monument is hope rendered visible. Today, I have hope. And now it is my pleasure to welcome someone who just recently acted up outside her own home in the face of protesters and has a legacy of activism and leadership for all of us. It is my pleasure to introduce our friend, Los Angeles County Supervisor for the 3rd District, the Honorable Sheila Kuehl.
I'm really honored and pleased and joyful to be here. I am a little overstimulated. I haven't been with this many people in one place for a year and a half. I'm not kidding. And you think it's so wonderful, but you know, but I'm here because, well, the same reason, of course, all of you are here. This is a really, really wonderful and important thing to do. And so thank you all. Thank you all for making this happen. This is a monument of stories. So here's some of my stories, briefly. During the 80s, when the AIDS pandemic was growing and manifesting and trying to be understood and taking so many people. I was partners with Tori Osborne, who is here today, one of the really fine leaders of the movement and activism and organizing in LA, and she was the head of the LA Gay and Lesbian Center at the time. And so my job was to drive her to the rallies and drive her to hospitals to sit at bedsides and drive her to quickly arranged commitment ceremonies because people didn't know if they would wake up the next morning, and to funerals, and also to be on the ready in case at any of the rallies I had to go to the jail and pick her up. We didn't know. I mean, people were not happy about this activism and wanted to deny it. So really, I was a witness more than anything, a witness to history. And that history has really taught me a lot. Everyone that I knew at the time was either already dead or dying, or frankly, expecting that they would die. Lesbians were being called on to kind of step up. People were saying, I don't know if there'll be any guys left at all, so you ladies ought to really kind of think about it. I remember Phil Wilson at Tori's 40th birthday party in my backyard when he said, I won't be around, Tori. I'm glad you will be. And it was, you were prepared at any time to say goodbye. But, of course, Phil, who has dyed his beard white for some reason, I don't know exactly why, some affectation, but then suddenly we had a world where it was possible that some people were actually going to get through. We're going to be able to find a combination that would allow their health to be strong enough to live. And the interesting thing was, and I'm sure Phil will tell you if you ask him and any others who lived through it, where they didn't think that there was a need to plan any future. Suddenly, there was going to be a future and there were no plans. It was kind of like, I didn't think I'd make it to 40. What am I going to do, with my life? My story's about Michael Kearns. Many of you probably know Michael, still alive, and knew him then. Wonderful performer, writer, actor, who essentially made it his work to represent the vast panoply of people who had died of AIDS and were living with AIDS, all across the spectrum of race, of all kinds of sexual orientations and gender identities, and men and women, gay and straight, trans, people of color. He would make them come to life and tell their stories. But that wasn't all that he did, because since he found that he was living longer than expected and he had no plans for the future, he said, I want to see what life is like at the other end, and applied to adopt a baby girl through the county. And it was granted by a very forward-thinking judge. He was the first man, HIV-positive man, to be granted an adoption in this county. And he adopted Tia, who now is so grown up she must be referred to as Catherine and no longer as Tia. But he brought her up, a great father, a wonderful man, and I want us really to remember him, think about him today as exemplary of all who lived. So I'm sure that's way beyond my 2 minutes, and I want to thank you again all for being here. I'm not certain who's next on the program, so I will just say thanks for the opportunity and the honor, and on with the show.
Congresswoman Maxine Waters is on her way, so we're going to adjust the program, and we will hear from her when she arrives. So if at this point, if Marianne Williamson, Jewel Tice Williams, Percival Pandy, and Robert Contreras would join Michael and Phil here on the stage. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. There was a movie several years ago with Drew Barrymore and Angelica Houston called Ever After. And for those of you who remember it, it was a story about the real drama, supposedly, of Cinderella. And the movie began with the Brothers Grimm visiting a woman, and the actress who played it was Jean Moreau. And in this movie, Jean Moreau's great-grandmother was the real Cinderella character. So the Brothers Grimm come to visit her. She tells them the story, which is the unfolding movie. And at the very end, after you've seen the real story of Cinderella and her prince and all of the people who were involved, Jean Moreau does the final scene. And Jean Moreau says to the Brothers Grimm, and now you know the story. And she says, ah, but monsieur, what is most important is that they lived. And that is how I feel about this memorial. They lived. And with this memorial, they will continue to live. I'm very impressed by the architecture. I think those of you who chose the design did such a beautiful job. The architecture is such a perfect representation of the piercing, the jabbing into the ground of our being, and then rising up in light. Magnificent job that you did. And as much as we are all remembering today what happened 40 years ago, in my heart and in my mind, I'm also very aware of those who will walk this block 40 years from now. The people who will say, what is this? The people who will be told, oh, that's the AIDS memorial. Some people who will say, what was AIDS? And they will learn. And particularly at a time like this, when people do not remember our history, when people revise our history, when people even degrade our history, it is so important that we remember not only what happened, but who made it happen. Those who suffered, those who loved, how people contracted the disease, how Los Angeles showed up, how the Hollywood community showed up. And all of those people, I believe, their spirits will be in these stories. Their spirits will be in this monument. This will be a place, a grove where people will gather, not only who remember, who were there, but people who will then remember who were not there. And they will know. They will know the sadness, they will know the pain, but they will also know the magnificence and the importance and the gravitas of a city that made this monument to make sure that everyone will always remember these people lived. Thank you very, very much.
In the late 1980s and early 90s, I volunteered with an organization that placed volunteers in hospitals and group homes to work with children with HIV/AIDS. I met Aaron when he was 9 months old and cared for him until he died at the age of 18 months. I have a photograph of us taken on his first and only birthday. The women who were full-time caregivers at the home used to call me Aaron's father because of our bond. Both his parents had already died. The women used to say he seemed jealous if he saw me holding another child. Aaron was very sick. His lungs filled constantly with mucus. I was often asked to gently pat him on the back while he was given medication through a nebulizer. I could tell how much stress it caused his tiny body. Seeing him suffer was not easy. When I spoke, Aaron would put his little hand against my jaw as if he were feeling the words as they formed in my mouth. On his first birthday, I brought him some presents and we had a little party on the ward. He was healthier than he had ever been before. He didn't need to remain attached to tubes. I was told I could take him up to the rooftop garden. I walked Aaron around the garden holding him, just he and I alone, outside under a beautiful blue sky. An airplane flew overhead and he looked up. I told him about airplanes. I showed him flowers, rubbed them against his cheek so he could feel them. I just kept talking to him. He held my jaw as I spoke the entire time, feeling the words as they formed. When Aaron died months later, the women at the home told me that was the only day of his life that he went outside, other than for trips to the hospital. Aaron was moved to a hospital for his last few days and placed in an oxygen tent. I went every day after work. While I was not present when he died late one night, I leaned in under the tent whenever I was there and never stopped talking to him. Aaron was one of the reasons that I joined ACT UP. His memory fueled my activism. We lost so much in this epidemic, so much suffering, so much death of those far too young to die. By Ray Black.
It's sweating, bleeding, puking, shitting in ways you never have before. It's pain you never imagined. It's fear you never dreamed. It's grief you never guessed. It's the frenzy of the medicine, too many visits to the outpatient clinic, the 2 days in the hospital for tests, the weeks for the treatments. It's the doctor's kindness, the nurse's caring, the phlebotomist's apology. It's the doctor's prodding, the nurse's poking, the phlebotomist's piercing. It's caring for your friends in ways you never have before, intimate ways, horrible ways, ways that take more of your love than you knew you had. It's the fighting back. It's the building of places to care for the living and for the dying. It's courage. It's honor. It's integrity. It's people joining forces in a time of great need. It's people caring for their own and finding love and surviving and believing in the future even when we are hurting more than we have ever hurt before. It's bearing the unbearable, enduring the unendurable, and hoping in the face of hopelessness. It's the haunted look in your lover's eyes when a new crisis begins. It's mourning together. It's mourning alone. It's holding him in your arms and in your heart. It's crying because your heart is breaking over leaving him behind. It's the sweet pain of knowing that you are dying and the overwhelming sadness for those who will kiss you into their dreams. It's a wail. It's a howl. It's beyond your grasp. It's awful. It's awesome. It's AIDS. Chris Brownlee, AIDS activist, co-founder of the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. He died on November 28, 1989. My name is Phil Wilson, and I am the vice chair of the Foundation for the AIDS Monument. Chris was my partner. I want to thank Bobby for sharing Raymond Black's story with us. I was infected with HIV in 1980. I was 24 years old. My entire life has been played out against the backdrop of the HIV/AIDS pandemic. Every life passage, every intimate moment, every love, every heartbreak, every kiss, every orgasm, every laugh, every tear, every joy, every misery, AIDS was there. I'm a gay man of a certain age, you might say. In my opinion, everything that you need to know about this world, you can learn it from a Broadway musical. One of my favorite musicals is Hamilton. At the end of the play, George Washington reminisces And he says, "Let me tell you what I wish I'd known when I was young and dreamed of glory. You have no control who lives, who dies, who tells your story. And when you are gone, who remembers your name, who keeps your flame, who tells your story?" When I was diagnosed, the doctor said, "Well, if you're lucky, you might have 6 months. So you might want to get your affairs in order." I was 28. I didn't have any affairs to get in order. Last April, I celebrated my 65th birthday. I'm lucky. I've gotten to tell my story, but Chris didn't get to tell his. Raymond Black didn't get to tell his story. Crystal Gamet didn't get to tell her story. Ryan White didn't get to tell his story. And Kiyoshi Kamayayo didn't get to tell his story. I used to have a little black book. There are not many of you that might remember those. We used to keep the names and the telephone numbers of our friends and loved ones in it. And whenever someone died, I put a black mark next to their name. I lost the book in 1987. There were 250 check marks in the book by then. I never bought another book, and I stopped counting. None of them got to tell their story. And that's why we're here today. That is what the AIDS Monument is all about. It will tell their stories. It will remember their names. It will keep their flames. It will tell all of their stories, regardless of who they were or where they were or how and when they died. It will tell the stories of those who are living with HIV, and it will tell the courageous stories of those who dared to stand up and dared to fight and dared to say, "Not on my watch." This all started with a young researcher at UCLA Medical Center. He noticed a strange disease among some of his patients. They were all young gay men. They presented with a strange pneumonia or a cancer. He published a paper, and the CDC included his findings in the June 5th Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report, the MMWR, and a pandemic was born. That young physician was Dr. Michael Gottlieb.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Phil. First, I want to congratulate the board of the foundation for creating this monument, and the city of West Hollywood, and all the people who have contributed to it. It's a long time coming, and it's certainly very welcome. 40 years after the start of this HIV pandemic. The first 5 patients that my colleagues and I reported 40 years ago from UCLA will be remembered in the AIDS monument dedicated today. They are a part of history. 4 were white and 1 was African American. It's curious that the initial report omitted any mention of race, and for that I've taken well-deserved criticism from Phil and others. Just how it got by the editors at the CDC, I don't know, because it is a basic thing that we in medicine record in a medical chart when we see patients. And just how it was omitted, I can't tell you. Perhaps a rush to publish. But Mayor Horvath mentioned that we could not mention the names of these patients, but I will. It's been a long time. So there was Michael, Philip, Chuck, Randy. Like me, they were in their 30s, just starting out in their careers with so many hopes for the future, pursuing their educations and their professional pursuits. And they were cut short, their lives were cut short by this horrible virus and this opportunistic infection, pneumocystis pneumonia. When I saw the scenes coming out of New York in the early days of COVID-19, I recalled days that David Hardy and I were on the ICU at UCLA, and we had patients, every patient in the ICU was on a ventilator with pneumocystis pneumonia. And it was a clear-cut flashback for me for those early days. And there were so many parallels, I think, with these pandemics, but I'm not going to belabor that in my 2 minutes. So I remember these patients as if I saw them yesterday. Their appearances and manner are seared into my memory. I remember what they looked like. I remember their life stories. Part of my training was to really understand patients, understand where they'd been, what they'd done in their lives, whatever. I was interested in people, and I wanted to know more about their lives. And it wasn't just from the point of view of being an epidemiologist to try to put it all together. I just wanted to know who they were. Philip was from a Mennonite family in Nebraska. Chuck raised finches as a hobby. I recall how they dealt with the fear and uncertainty with courage and with grace. They were kind and understanding of our lack of knowledge and our frustration at having so little information and nothing to address the fundamental problem, which of course was HIV, which we didn't know about back then. Their illness didn't have a name and it didn't have a cause. All 5 of the first patients died within the first year of their presentation. And after the first 5, there were 5 more, less well remembered than the first, and ultimately 725,000 who died in the United States alone and who will be remembered here at this monument. So today, 40 years later, we have medicines for treatment and for prevention. But there are inequities in access to both treatment and prevention here in the United States and in poorer countries around the world, and those inequities demand our attention. So in closing, as we confront the most recent plague, I ask you all, and of course the monument serves this purpose, to remind people that the HIV pandemic is by no means over. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, I want to thank all of you that came out today and all of you that have supported this monument coming into its beginnings today and eventually to its fruition. Wow, 40 years. That's a long time. I can remember the first incident that I had, and that was when I had a catch one in Houston in 1981, and I was waiting for the queen that was putting the drag show together to arrive so that she could do what she did. And a few of her friends came in and said, you know, April's not coming today. I said, what do you mean April's not coming today? She didn't call me or anything, and that's not like her. She's in the hospital with pneumonia, they told me. She's been in there for a week. Okay. The show went on, but April did not. Within a week of that time, she was dead. Then I started getting calls from my folks here in LA telling me that there was pneumonia, this plague going on. And so right away I closed the club in Houston as fast as I could to get back home to my home family, the folks that had been with me from the very beginning. I have probably at least 1,000 stories I could choose from, or more. But I'm going to start with one that was the dearest to my heart. And it started with my spouse, Rue, opening up Rue's house, which was the first home or shelter in the country for women and children with AIDS. This was after we had helped open the Minority AIDS Project, after I was on the board of APLA. We realized that there was no space for women, especially women with their children, to be able to come and keep their kids with them. This one lady in particular, her name was Iris, and she was from East Los Angeles. She was probably about 40 years old and had lived in Watts her entire life and had never been to the beach. So one of the things that we built into our program was taking, thank you, okay, taking our clients to places that they had not visited here in Los Angeles. While Iris was there, she had the baby, and the baby stayed there with us for like 3 years too. And once Iris died, the grandmother took the baby, and I didn't hear much about how the kid was doing after that. But it so happens that she had gone to Crossroads High School, and her last desire that she had was to stay alive long enough to graduate from high school. She was 17 and she did graduate from high school. And within 3 or 4 months of that, she too had passed. Like I said, there's a lot of stories. One I'm going to tell about a bartender that worked for me. His name was Henry. And Henry was the funniest dude that you could ever imagine listening to. And we used to talk all the time. I said, Henry, you know, you got to be safe. You got to be safe. He said, oh, no, sister, I'm fine. I do everything that I'm supposed to do. And then one day he came by and he said, he called me sister. He said, sister, I'm on my way to get my test. Okay. You want me to go with you? He said, no, there's nothing wrong with me. I shouldn't have it. Okay. So he left, came back about an hour or two later, and he said, sister, I can't believe it. Tears rolling down his face. I've got it. I said, okay, now what are we going to do about it? We're going to live the life that you have ever dreamed about and do as much as you can for others, because that's the key to it, to staying alive, I feel, is to be of service and helping as many people as you can. It helps you. You're the one that gets the reward from it. And I feel like the preacher talking to the choir, because all of y'all know what I'm talking about. And he was with us for a couple of years. And my last story is about a gentleman that was 50 when he came to the Unity Fellowship of Christ Church, which was the black church that was the parent company to the Minority AIDS Project. And one Sunday after church, he came over and laid his head on my shoulder and began to cry. He said, I was just diagnosed. He was 50 years old and just getting diagnosed. And just was ready to throw the towel in. He just knew he was going to die. And I said to him, as I said to you, the way you live is to become involved. And even if it's a moment or an hour or whatever you have left, then you live that to the fullest, and you live that serving other people. Well, 31 years later, at 81, James did pass. And he worked at an AIDS organization, Spectrum. Dr. Wilbur Jordan was the founder of that organization. And last but not least, once I mention Wilbur Jordan, it comes to me that when the epidemic first began, AZT was pretty much the only medicine that was available for folk then. And most black folk were allergic to it, so they could not take it. And Wilbert came to me and he said, Jewel, help us out a little bit. I know a place south of the border where I can get some interferon, and that interferon, it seems to work. So we were able to help him finance that, and I think it saved a lot of lives in that day. And this is it, one last story for this guy over here with the white beard playing Santa Claus. So, he has done so much for all of our communities, but especially the black AIDS community. Phil. And I had the privilege of seeing him grow into being this fine gentleman that he is, and never giving up. Appreciate you for that. So, this monument, and on the 29th of June, I've been invited to go to the ceremony at the black at the in the meantime men's groups space, which is where Chris Brownlee and Michael Weinstein and Carl Bean, it was the Carl Bean's house. And that day they're going to dedicate the Black AIDS Monument on the 29th. So this thing is growing. Feels good too, to honor those lost. But I'm of the ilk that we're all energetic beings, and we never really leave. The bodies wear out, and they're put to rest. But the energy of all those folks, like Chris, and like I said, I could call off 1,000 names if I wasn't so old and retarded. But thank you for listening.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Percival Pandy. I come to you this afternoon as a product of many of the people here and the work that they have done in the fight against HIV. This year, I'll be 38 years old, and my understanding and knowledge of HIV was very naive in my life. When I came to understand how HIV affected my community, I was a mere young man of 20 years old, not really realizing the effects it had on the general LGBTQ community or on the gay community in Los Angeles. I lived my life in pretty much of a bubble. I didn't understand um, what wasn't presented to me in that bubble. It was when I reached about the age of 28 years old that I realized that more than half of my friends had been affected by HIV. This was an awakening for me. This was a part of my life where I turned away from the things that I wanted in my life and turned to do the work that needed to be done in my life. At that point, I entered into public health service. My thirst was to, be help for the people I knew, provide services for the people that I knew, and understand what I needed to do to bring my community forward. And when I say bring my community forward, educate them about things that were lacking in my community, navigate them to services that they didn't understand that were provided just miles away from their homes. In my journey, I've worked for several of the organizations represented here. I've even been under the mentorship of Phil Wilson here at the Black AIDS Institute. Um, and in all of those experiences, it has made me come and become more responsive and reactive in my work against HIV in the community currently. In my current position as a program supervisor at the LA LGBT Center, I have learned what it has meant to be responsive. Dealing with the organization that reacted to HIV since 40 years ago when the first report was released. Being one of the first organizations to set up a hotline to give people answers around where to get services in their community. Then in 1984, opening one of the first testing sites in California to be responsive in the way that people understood to know their status and then get help for the medical needs and the medical services that they needed. Uh, in 1993, then we opened the Jeffrey Goodman Clinic, which became a huge specialty care clinic for people in Los Angeles County. And then we did not even stop there. We kept on intervening. We kept on doing the work at the LA LGBT Center. It was in 1996 when it was a lot of research and drug trials happening that the LA LGBT Center opened its doors to be part of those trials, to advance the medication that now helps this community. Again, I will say I'm a product of the work of all of you here. I'm here standing in front of you, understanding that HIV is not over, but you pressed it forward. Because of you and the way you voiced yourselves in those beginning times of HIV, because of the way you sacrificed, I'm here today. I can stand here today and talk about my experiences of being a young man, helping other people to be navigator service. Your work has led me to come into HIV service and be part of this. The work has not stopped. In this current iteration of how the center is extending its hands of service, we have opened 3 satellite spaces to communities that need those services the most. Currently, we have the Center South, which is located on the Mert Park, which has effectively started to do work in South Los Angeles with a lot of legendary service providers like Thais Williams and the MAP organization, APLA, and also Black AIDS Institute. We have also opened what we call Me Central in the Boyle Heights community to work with the Latino community and work with the legendary organizations that have done the work within Boyle Heights to move the needle forward with HIV. It is consistently that I say I'm a product of your work, and I thank you today for allowing me to speak and letting me tell my journey in HIV.
It's hard to believe that we've been living with this pandemic for the last 40 years. During these 40 years, we have seen how this disease has ravaged the lives of many people, especially gay men and transgender women. Minostar started 32 years ago to address a disease that was poorly understood and was believed in 1989 that it was not affecting Latinos. Members of GLUE, the gay Latino, the gay lesbian Latinos Unidos knew different. They started to see friends stop coming to their social events, to their meetings, stop answering the phones, and stop opening the door because they were so ashamed of people seeing their current state of health. Many of those died alone. Oscar de la O is one of the founding members for Bienestar. He was instrumental in opening our first office over on Sunset Junction in Silver Lake. From a 12 by 16 office, Oscar and I, among other volunteers, we provided HIV information, counseling, we conducted support groups, did outreach, and make arrangements for funerals for young men in their 20s and 30s. Many of whom were in this country alone or have been thrown out of their homes for being gay and now sick with a disease that not many understood. We must have seen hundreds of men come in through our doors. But many did not stay with us for that long, because during that time, death was very common. Being around the dying takes a great toll on you. You have to put a strong face to the individual sitting in front of you and reassure them that they're not going to die. And also to lie to them, to let them know, to lie to them, to let them know that there are medical breakthroughs and maybe there's a cure coming up, when you know in your heart that there's no cure in sight. For Bienestar staff and volunteers, real change came with the first wave of retro antivirals that came online in 1995. This was the time when the miracle happened. We started to see young men that were at death's door recover and be able to enjoy their life. But we also saw something that was coming. The pandemic, up to that point, was concentrated in white gay men and was now shifting towards people of color, especially black and Latino men. While antiretrovirals saved the lives of many, we also saw many Latino gay men die because they did not get into treatment early enough. Unfortunately, the factors that contributed to the rise of HIV in my community have not been totally erased. Homophobia, transphobia, racism, discrimination, health disparities, economic and social injustices, the lack of true equity and equality continue to factor within the community that continues to produce poor health outcomes and a lack of overall well-being. I hope that this monument will help individuals, especially young gay men and transgender women of color, to learn about the dark moments the gay community had to endure in not a so far along past, and to remind others that while many have moved to other causes, that the HIV pandemic continues, especially in the Latino community, where the numbers of infections among young gay men and transgender women continue to increase. The pandemic continues, and it's up to us as a community to see it end. Thank you.
A woman who probably needs no introduction, but is a beacon of light and a warrior in the AIDS community, and a wonderful woman and actress, Sharon Stone.
The reason I need no introduction is because we've all been in this together for so long. I need to thank Elizabeth Taylor for her guts and her glory, and those incredible diamonds and high heels Matilda Krim. What an amazing, brave, incredible warrior. Sir Elton John. These people who shoved me up front and told me to do this. It's been so long. And while we are here in our little neck of the woods creating this memorial, this is a global moment. And while we stood here fighting hand in hand, 44 million people died on our watch. And we felt every one of them. And we stood out there and raised money. And no, we didn't hate, we raged. And we did not let that light die. And do you know how? Because people like my mom, a woman in a small town in Pennsylvania, like your moms and your dads and your brothers and your sisters, went out there and did the work, stood by people that they did not know and they did know, but whom they decided to love in the face of fear and confusion and that endless shame, and said, I will love you, and I will understand you, and I will help you, no matter how scared, how difficult, how crazy you may behave, because you are terrified of this unknown thing that is happening to you, because no one wants to hear about this crazy, unknown, scary thing that you want to talk about, that you want to handle, that you want to face. And all of you, 40 years later, still standing here, you did this. You made these changes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your guts. Thank you for your compassion. Thank you for your dignity. Thank you for the primal understanding that love, care, humanity, perseverance, dignity, integrity, and humanity is bigger than bigotry, fear, hatred, confusion, and what belongs to you. You. Nothing belongs to you. Nothing. Love is given to us, and allows us compassionate understanding of the human condition. And that is why we are here to say thank you to those who have the courage and the dignity and the decency to remember those who suffered for loss of love, for loss of care, for loss of hope, for loss of selfishness, for loss of ego, for loss of seeing the person next to them and saying, you're as important as me. You're as important as me. And Jewel, you're more important than me. Dr. Gottlieb, you're more important than me. You guys who dragged my ass out of bed so that I could go around the world and help you raise money to do this, you're more important than me. And so today, I have the distinct opportunity to read a memorial letter that describes why. My Mama by Debbie Lynn Kellner, August 2nd, 1964, January 20th, 2004. My beautiful mama, who never knew she was beautiful and never got that message from this world. I wish I could tell her how beautiful she was. Losing my mother was like losing part of my own body. I compiled some pictures to share a little bit about who she was. She was a woman who was born into extreme poverty, like my mom, to a family of 10. She was blessed to be a twin, like my mom, and have that incredible, deep connection to this world. My mom could not read or write, and she suffered more physical violence than I can ever bring myself to describe in a post, like my mom. But she survived longer than the men who tried to kill her, like my mom. She fought to graduate from high school, like my mom, despite the incredible bullying she experienced for being in this special education program. My mom contracted HIV at 21 and was convinced she would never have access to romantic love again in her life. That was partially true. So when she met Tom, he had just been released from prison and he was homeless. So he immediately moved in with us, even though that got us kicked out of public housing. My mom was willing to overlook that because at least she had someone who loved her. Her ashes are buried with him, and I still find that fact sickening. She survived to the age of 39. She survived the early years of the AIDS epidemic, despite chronic poverty, domestic violence, stigma, and depression. She loved all of my friends, like my mom. And to the friends who were brave enough to show her love at the end, when she knew and they knew that she had AIDS, I will never forget them. I am grateful for how hard she fought to live long enough to help me grow into the almost woman I was when she died. I will miss her forever. From Crystal Fawn Garnett. You know, the main thing I learned from being an AIDS worker was that it isn't just about AIDS. It's about looking at the person next to you and accepting them. Just accepting them, no matter what. Because you know what? We're in it together. Thank you.
I'm reading the story of Kiyoshi Kuromiya. Kiyoshi Kuromiya's birth in 1943 in a Japanese-American internment camp, ironically called Heart Mountain, set the tone for a life of advocating for civil rights and against war. He dedicated his life to educating and empowering people. As a personal assistant to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Kuromiya, along with Dr. King, Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, and James Furman, suffered attacks by the sheriff's deputies and their volunteer crew on March 13, 1965, while leading a group of black high school students on a voter registration march to the state capitol in Montgomery, Alabama. His head wound required 20 stitches. Soon thereafter, Kurumia marched with Dr. King and was beaten during the Selma March of 1965, and later helped care for the King children in the week of Dr. King's funeral. That same year, he marched in the 1965 gay rights protest in Philadelphia. In 1967, Kurumia joined the hippies Allen Ginsberg and Abby Hoffman in a Vietnam War protest and headline-grabbing performance at the Pentagon, where they used an ancient Aramaic chant in an attempt to levitate and exorcise demons from the Pentagon. He was a founder of Gay Liberation Front Philadelphia and brought a campy spin to protests and demonstrations. He said, "We'd go up to a line of cops with tear gas grenades on horses and armed with clubs and link arms and do a can-can." Really threw them off guard. Kurumia was an openly gay delegate to the 1970 Black Panther Constitutional Convention, where he conducted a workshop on gay rights and where gay liberation was endorsed. He edited ACT UP's Standard of Care publication, the first of its kind to educate people living with HIV on how to care for themselves. He founded the Critical Care Project, which provided free internet access and a 24-hour hotline for people with HIV in the Philadelphia region, and whose newsletter brought treatment information to thousands across the world. Kurumia advocated for treatment designed with community input for the entire HIV/AIDS community, including people of color, IV drug users, and women. He sent newsletters to hundreds of incarcerated people to make sure they had up-to-date information on treatment for HIV and AIDS. He participated in the successful lawsuit against the Communications Decency Act, ensuring that freedom of speech on the internet included medical information related to AIDS and was preserved. He was the lead plaintiff in Kurumia versus the United States, a class action suit seeking to legalize medical marijuana, including for use by AIDS patients. A life begun in barbed wire incarceration and defined by the quest for freedom. Kiyoshi Kurumia died of complications from AIDS in the year 2020.
Thank you, Rogerio. Before you speak, we're going to hear from Jeannie White Ginder, who is the mother of Ryan White. She's over here.
Thank you all. I'm so proud to be here. My name is Jeannie White Ginder, and I'm the mother of Ryan White, and I also have a beautiful daughter, Andrea, who is sitting next to me. But I'm just a mom. I'm a mom like your moms. But because of a misunderstood disease called AIDS, my life changed overnight. It was not anything I thought I was going to have to worry about or experience, but in 1984, my son Ryan White was diagnosed with AIDS. He was born with severe hemophilia and took a medicine to clot his blood from the time he was born. Little did we realize that the medicine we thought to clot his blood and save his life was going to be the drug that took his life, because we knew later that it contained the HIV virus. Ryan turned 13 on December the 6th. A couple of days after that, 1984, he got off the school bus and he came in the house and he said, "Mom, you got to do something." He said, I can't even get off the school bus without being tired. He said, we had to run a lap today at school, Mom, and the teacher got real upset because I couldn't finish. He said, Mom, I don't understand what's wrong with me. They finally put him in the hospital, and he was diagnosed with pneumonia in both lungs. They treated him for bacterial pneumonia, and he never got any better. Finally, they sent him to Riley Hospital for Children, and in the emergency room, Dr. Kleinman said, we need to do a biopsy. I said, well, Ryan's a severe hemophiliac. He's not supposed to have any surgeries. He said, this child's going to die if we can't find out what's wrong with him. I had to sign as a mom a horrible paper that said there was a good possibility that he wouldn't make it through surgery because of his hemophilia and because they didn't know what was wrong with him. There was no AIDS test at the time, so they wanted to do a 2-inch biopsy. I allowed that. They did the 2-inch biopsy. They sent the results to Denver, Colorado. The results came back that he had pneumocystis, which said he had AIDS. I said, well, how could my son have AIDS? Dr. Kleiman said, well, we think this might be the tip of the iceberg. And sure enough, in 1985, as they started bringing in all hemophiliacs, there was over 9,000 that was infected with the HIV virus due to contaminated blood clotting factor. But Dr. Kleiman told me he had a T cell count of 25. Well, I didn't know what 25 meant, but he said that Brian would probably only live 3 to 6 months if we could get him over what he has now. I remember thinking, no, this ain't true. This ain't true. And I said, I want to know everything there is to know about this disease. He said, there's not a lot of information out there. I said, don't tell me that. I said, every cough, every fever, I'm going to worry about what I'm doing or whether I'm doing enough as a mom. He said, I know you're a strong Christian lady, but you have to remember the people fighting this disease and trying to do something about it now is mostly the gay community. He said, I'll give you the number of AMFAR, and you can do what you want to. I tell you, it was the best thing in the whole world. I called AMFAR, and on the other end of the line was a gentleman by the name of Terry Byrne, who became my best friend in the whole world. AMFAR, as I started meeting more and more people with AIDS, and yes, they were the gay community, fighting like hell to make a difference and to fight for everybody with this disease. And then Ryan saw through that, and Ryan said, you know, Mom, we're going to fight the disease and not the people who have it. He said, you know, once you have AIDS, you're just like everybody else who has AIDS. You're fighting to stay alive. He says, Mom, we're going to make a difference. I saw a kid. He became famous because of his fight to go to school. But he became even more famous because of a bill named after him called the Ryan White Care Act, which Ryan ended up, thank you. Well, Ryan passed away April 8th, 1990, 5.5 years, which was a lot longer than they ever predicted that he would live. We get a call at the hospital from Senator Kennedy. Elton John was at the hospital by Ryan's bedside, being quite the secretary, and he answered the phone and he told me, this is a call I think you should take. I got on the phone and it was Senator Kennedy. He said, we're having these hearings here in D.C. He said, with your permission, he said, nobody has brought so much attention to this disease than Ryan has. He's on the nightly news. He said, we have people caring about people with AIDS now. With your permission, we would like to name it the Ryan White Care Act. And at first I thought, well, that would be nice. I mean, I was worried about my son. I really did not think too much more about it. But after my son passed away, I get another call from Senator Kennedy. He said, we want you to come to D.C. I said, no, Ryan did that, not me. He said, no, really. He said, we need your voice. Ryan's death is so fresh on everybody's minds. This is a time for us to make a difference. I said, you know, I'm not smart enough. I said, I know nothing about the government. I said, I know nothing about the bill. And I said, well, we have people that know about the bill. He said, just be a mom. So I kept saying no. Finally, my friends from AMFAR said, do this for us. Do this for us living with AIDS still. And I tell you, I said, oh, I don't know. And Terry says, well, we know about the bill. We'll represent the bill. Finally, I get a call from Senator Hatch. Senator Hatch said, I'm not taking no for an answer. He said, I have 25 senators lined up for you. All we want you to do is be a mom. We're going to approach this disease a little differently. Everybody has a mom. We're going to touch people's hearts. We're going to get this bill passed. It was bipartisan, which you don't see that too much anymore. But this memorial means so much. It's for all the people living and for the people who cared so much to take care of the people. There's so many people that have been by the wayside, so to speak, and just did it because of the love in their hearts that took care of people. But we have people now that are living long, and people are carrying on the torch. And I see so many of them, Phil, and there's just so many people that I'm just so thankful that they are here today, and people are living on. To me, when you go by this monument, sorry, I just would like, even if you can't stop by, I would like for everybody to just blow a kiss in the wind. Blow a kiss in the wind as I do all the time. Ryan always told me, keep your chin up, Mom. Everything's going to be okay. Well, everything will be okay. Sorry. Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, I love you all, and thank you also for inviting me and having me here today.
Thank you, Jeannie White Ginder. And now we'll hear from Jake Glazer, who is the son of Elizabeth Glazer and the sister of Ariel Glazer.
I'm almost at a loss for words. The one thing that I really feel is so poignant about everything that I've heard from every story told, every face that I see, is courage. Storytelling takes courage. Standing up and owning your insecurities, owning your fears, owning your identity takes courage. And it's the courage of those that came before us, the panels on the quilt. Mothers, sisters, brothers, husbands, wives, boyfriends, girlfriends, partners, aunts, uncles, grandmas, grandpas, you name it, that broke the mold, would not accept the status quo for what it was, and said, we need a new perspective. Jeannie, I thank you for every minute, every step you take, everything that your son gave, and every single person here that has been able to witness the change that has happened from that. Because change is real. I know that every single person here today is a part of an organization, of a fundraising effort, of an awareness, of an education that has spoken to a very specific community affected and impacted by HIV and AIDS. Without the collaboration and all of our individual effort, so many people would have been left behind. My mother was a second grade school teacher that moved here from New York, and she married Starsky from Starsky and Hutch. I mean, come on. Could you have imagined a crazier story? To then right here in West Hollywood at Cedars-Sinai give birth to my sister Ariel. She lost 7 pints of blood while giving birth and needed a blood transfusion, and that blood was dirty, and she contracted HIV. This is one of many stories that have changed the course of history, because not just individuals like Elizabeth Glazer or Ariel Glazer or Ryan White, but every single one of us that have witnessed the courage and embodied that courage to take every single step in our lives for the love and the compassion of those next to us, to look at each and every person that sits by our side, that crosses our path in our life, and show them the love that they own and they need and that we respect and see in them. We all have challenges. This is the human immunodeficiency virus. Guess what? We all got immune systems. Every single person on this planet is connected to HIV. And as my mom understood, collaboration will set us all free, because this has been the greatest opportunity that humanity has ever had to understand our immune system and confront what we have this year with COVID. Courage is what it takes to tell stories. Every single word that comes out of our mouth resonates through all of time. And I get the honor through the Elizabeth Glaser Pediatric AIDS Foundation to travel this planet, continent to continent, and speak with young people who don't have the opportunity to tell their stories. And guess what? Their stories are different than their stories, than my story, than your story and your son's story. Their story is a story of life and light and hope, of rebellion against a stigma that they did not ask for, that was placed upon them. I am 36 years old. I'm turning 37 years old on October 25th. I'm HIV positive. I have an HIV negative girlfriend, and I just left a doctor's office 2 days ago where I got to talk about having my own children. The power that that gives an individual who feels hopeless in life immediately turns into hopeful for their future. There are very few people around the world that know the reality of HIV today and the opportunity for their future every single day they have to live and through every single opportunity in their life. And I ask all of you to embody this courage that this monument represents. Allow this to be a lightning rod that spawns storytelling into the future, no matter religion, race, no matter your financial capability in this world, whether you are someone of notable stature on this planet, or if you are one of the foot soldiers that is walking this earth, impacting people one by one, because I see with my own eyes the power that humanity can have because of my own existence. I'm here because of you. Without you, this doesn't exist. So we are no longer helpless, we are hopeful. Behavior, simple behavior, can get rid of HIV in our lifetime. We have the science and we have the tools. And the reason we have those is because of every single story told before we arrived here today where this monument will be erected. I love each and every one of you for the effort you put forth, for everything you've done 40 years ago until now. I even get the honor of sitting here with my doctor, Dr. Michael Gottlieb, who cared for my mother, and I am fortunate to have you looking after me and the woman I love in my life. I think there are very few of us, and we're looking at each other right now. Every one of us here gets to leave here today and carry that courage on into every single person we interact with in our lives. I want to thank every one of you, the city of West Hollywood, and my promise to you is that, at least in my time, I will continue to be radical, and I ask you to be radical with me. Go against the grain, break the status quo, create a new paradigm in the world that is of life, hope, and positivity, because HIV is not a death sentence anymore. Those stories made it something that we can eradicate in our lifetime, and all of you are going to do that with us. So I love you, and I thank you, and it is just a privilege and an honor to be here next to each and every one of you. Let's end this before all of us leave this beautiful physical experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. And one more from the crowd. We have Bambi Salcedo.
Primero que nada, quiero darle gracias a mi poder superior por darme la oportunidad de estar aquí con ustedes. También quiero honrar a todas las personas que están aquí y a las personas que no están con nosotros hoy en día. I know that it was hard for some of you to understand what I just say, but it's always a custom that I honor my higher power, my Creator, for giving me the opportunity to breathe one more day. I also want to honor our ancestors, the beautiful people who are no longer with us, and the beautiful people who are here with us today. I stand before you as one of those people that all of us are talking about. I am a trans woman who has been living with HIV for 30 years. I am one who has had the privilege to be 50 years old. Most trans women, the expectancy of the life of trans women is 35 years old. And I get to breathe one more day today. Thank you so much to Phil Wilson and the organizers of this monument for inviting me to be one of the representatives of the most marginalized people in our society. You know, I appreciate everything that has been said about what has been done, about what we have been done. Thank you so much for your work. Thank you so much for the life of Ryan White. But the truth is that there are people out there, the people who are my sisters, my siblings, the people who I see every single day, who are walking the streets homeless. And it's not about behavior. It's about the societal conditions that we are put on, where we're situated for us to engage on those behaviors that they tell us that we have to, as means to survive, as means to do sex work in order to survive, as means to inject drugs for us to get away from our realities. That is the reality of many people out there. Here in Los Angeles, it's one of the counties that has the most infections. Young Black and Latino people are the ones who are getting infected the most. But trans women are the ones that have the highest incidence of HIV infection. But they don't count us. They don't count us because we are a minute community. Because the statistics said that only 100,000 are the ones that are going to count. There is about 1.5 million trans people living in the United States. How many of us know that? We're about 1% of the population, yet we are about 27% of the infections. And so as I sit here, as we commemorate and celebrate this monumental moment and this historic moment that we are experiencing today, I don't know if we're celebrating 40 years, because to me, this is a fucked up situation. It's a fucked up reality that I live every single day when I look at the people in the eyes and I see their pain and I see their broken souls and I see when they ask for help, for support. And so the question is, once all of this is over, once we have this beautiful monument that is going to remind us about the people, what are we going to do about the people who are still here? How are we going to use our privilege, the access that we have? Because I don't have access. My people don't have access. I don't have access to politicians. I don't have access to wealth. I don't have access to people who have the means to create the changes that need to happen in order for us to eradicate this disease. But some of us do here. And what are we going to do to continue to support the work that needs to happen? Our sibling here is telling us, be radical. That's not what is happening right now. We're being complacent. We're being complacent because HIV and AIDS does not necessarily have affect us directly to some of us. Why? Because we have some resources, but we need to think about the people also who are out there and who are struggling every day to have food in their mouth and who are struggling every day to get a roof over their heads. So I invite you to not to be complacent, to celebrate our ancestors, to fight like hell for us to have better qualities of life. Some of us do have good qualities of life. But what about others? They say, love thy neighbor. Some of us don't do that. Don't even want to look at people in their eyes. Those who are hungry, those who are homeless, those who have to resort into using drugs. We need to see people. We need to look at our humanity. So I invite you to be intentional about the work that you're going to be doing, about how you're going to support people, and what you're going to do. Thank you so much for the opportunity, for being here, for speaking on behalf of my siblings who are not able to be here, who do not have a voice. But my responsibility as a privileged trans Latina, mujer, inmigrante, indocumentada, is to ensure that I uplift the lives of my people. Thank you so much.
I am humbled to be here. Kiss to the wind, Mrs. White. My name's Rogerio Carvalero. I'm chair of the design committee for the Foundation for the AIDS Monument. I've been on the board for almost 9 years now and developing the project for us. 1 year from this day, on this site, at the beating heart of the LGBTQ municipality, will be transformed with over 200 monuments we call traces. These traces will rise from the ground like tree trunks, like lightning rods, towering above us. These traces are totems. Each trace symbolizes the collective spirit of the caregivers, the advocates, and those we lost and continue to lose on the steep climb towards unity and equality. The organic materials composing each trace will patina in subtle variations, like the unique lives and deaths of the people they represent. Their mottled surface reflect our struggles to survive, to thrive beyond enormous heartbreak as we commemorate our war heroes, our pandemic dead. We will walk among these traces that spot, then clump, then roar, with the outbreak that fueled our communal devastations. The magnitude of loss overwhelming our landscape and vision until we arrive, finally, at this respite grove where we stand today, where we may, once again, personalize our relationship to our community that pulled together to survive. And in the evening, as the sun vanishes from the sky, each trace becomes a candle in a peaceful vigil, seeking justice, championing empathy and love. Thank you.
Thank you, Rogerio. Thank you, everyone, for your patience today. I know this is lasting longer than anyone expected. I'm going to cut my next remarks, but what I can't do is fail to recognize the founder of all of this, the man who wrote a position paper in 2010 that gave rise to the monument that we are going to have on this very spot, Craig Doherty.
Let me just give a shout out to Erwin and Phil for pulling this beautiful program together today. The idea for this was way back in 2010 when I met with my friend John Duran, who married my husband Tony and I 2 years prior to that. John embraced the idea. Then I met with my friend Jason Kennedy, who brought the vision and the perspective of a younger generation, which we really needed for this monument. Let me just say it's 10 years later. I'm so proud and happy that we're here, thanks to all of you. Let me just try to put a bit of a coda on this. You've heard a lot about the monument, and let me just try to wrap it up by saying that vision is being realized thanks to all of you. We will tell the story. We who lived through the AIDS crisis, suffered, fought, took care of the sick, and the dying. We will tell the story. We won't leave it to others who might shape history to their own liking or their agenda. That was very important to us. We're building this monument right here in West Hollywood. This is a city, early on, that had non-discrimination ordinances and cared for the sick and dying. This city was a beacon to the entire country, so we're so proud to build this right here in West Hollywood. The digital monument will extend all these beautiful stories and invite the participation of anyone, anywhere. And we're very proud to be launching the digital monument. We garnered tremendous support, over 1,300 donors, which shows the depth of community support. And that was very important. I just want to thank my fellow board members and John Guile, because we really did a lot of work there, very important work. And finally, the lessons of history will be passed down to younger and newer generations. They will better understand what happened with the AIDS crisis. Not only the devastation, but the beauty and heroism and the response of countless people, future generations. They will understand the power of love, the power of advocacy, and the power of community, and yes, the power of activism. And finally, I just want to give a quick thanks to Mark Lehman, whose incredible leadership took our fledgling nonprofit to where we are today, and to Erwin for keeping the flame alive, and to Phil. So I have the honor to introduce Rabbi Denise Edgar and Imam Ani Zonneveld, who will give the benediction today.
Not everyone gets Sharon Stone as a stagehand. Dear friends, it's been a long and hot afternoon, but these 40 years have been longer and harder. And so the time that we have spent here together is sacred. For 3.5 decades, I've served as a rabbi for this West Hollywood community, alongside many of you. We went to hospitals, we held hands. Sometimes we were the only person alone with those with HIV/AIDS. We buried them, we made their quilts, we celebrated their lives, and now we embody their stories. Some of us continue to serve this sacred HIV/AIDS community, helping to give life, renewal, and, as we heard, hope. We've taken this time today to remember our friends and our family, our loved ones who have died from HIV/AIDS and whose stories are ours. We've taken the time to remember our loved ones who live each and every day with HIV and AIDS. Jewish tradition teaches that we are to revere the memory of our loved ones and to honor their lives in two ways: by giving tzedakah, charity, in their memory, and by living our lives in their honor. And so as we gathered in this sacred space that will become a tribute and the embodiment of stories, let us know that we still have a responsibility to continue to care for our friends and our neighbors who have AIDS and HIV, in partnership with our city and our social service agencies and our medical professionals. We must continue to convince our government and to help those with HIV/AIDS, not only here but around the world. As we heard, AIDS is a global issue. And so let our time from this space, in this center, where so many we have loved and lost, let us spread that love and light out into the world that will rise from this space in the pillars of light. Let us remember and let us embody their stories. May this place always be known as holy ground, for it is holy ground. Ma norah hamakom hazeh, said Jacob the patriarch in the book of Genesis. How amazing, how awe-filled is this holy place. When we mark our time here, and as the pillars rise, let us remember that we are treading on holy ground. May this light shine brightly into our hearts and into future generations. Amen.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ani Zonneveld of Muslims for Progressive Values. I will first open with a phrase from the Quran about the importance of life in Arabic, followed by in English. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. وَمَنْ أَحْيَا فَكَأَنَّمَا أَحْيَا النَّاسَ جَمِيعًا. And in English, in the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. If anyone save a life, it shall be as though they have saved the lives of all mankind. When Muslims speak of God as the most merciful, the root word of mercy, rahim in Arabic, means the womb, a place where we are all created, a place where we are cared for in the most loving, protective, and nurturing environment. I call upon everyone to live their day-to-day lives in the same manner, to care to be nurturing of each other, and in that act of kindness, may it save lives. The launch of this monument today honors those who did live their lives in that nurturing manner, and for those 725,000 souls who have passed. This monument is a physical testimonial of kindness, compassion, and of mercy. And for all of those working in realizing this monument, you are the earthly manifestation of God. And to that I say, Amin.